I have an ability to meet people. Met a guy who we referred to as the scam man, basically insider trading. He knew a stock that was going to be bought. So I rustled up all the money I could, bought a bunch of options. Sure enough, it was a deal. Stock went up $30. I made $1 million. I ended up leaving my job, becoming a trader, lost all my money. I saw this full-page ad for a company called Snelling Temporary Services. Talked to him for like 15 minutes, tell him my stories. Like, me and my wife are getting divorced. We can't keep the business. How about you buy me? The first month, we made 30 grand. And that was the least amount of money we made in the next 6.5 years. We got up to like $20 million company, making a couple $1 million a year. Be the master at one thing, and then maybe the master of two. Don't be kind of good at a lot of things. Those people make 50 grand a year.
Welcome back to another episode of the Austin Zaback Show. Today I have Brett Hardt on the show, and he went from, really being broke and buried in debt to building not one, but two multi-million-dollar staffing empires. He's made millions, he's lost millions, and he ultimately retired at the age of 32 years old. He's done a lot of really cool stuff, including helping build what is now Scottsdale National Golf Club, and even trademarked and sold a successful apparel brand built on the phrase "attitude is free," which I noticed you're wearing that shirt right now, Brett. And I just am excited to have you on the show.
I'm happy to be here. When I met you, when you came out and shot the video on my big house, I really, I love dealing with young people. My son was an elite basketball player from the time he was 9 all the way up through college, and I was always around young people. I probably relate to young people better than older. And when you came, you and Mo came to my house, talking to you, I always ask questions about what people do. And I really respected your hustle. I mean, that was, what drew me to you. The video was great, but I always like hearing about young people because it's hard today.
Yeah.
When I graduated college in 1985 with, average grades and just a finance degree and, started at $850 a month and then, did what I did, that doesn't happen much. It's real, unless you have a certain skill, engineer, doctor, attorney, accountant, coder, just regular guys. It's hard to make it.
Yeah.
And, meeting you and seeing what you've accomplished, I was really intrigued.
I appreciate that. While we're on that subject, and then we'll get into your story, why do you think that is? Like, why has it gotten harder over the course of time?
Well, the barriers of entry are higher. But the main thing is, to me, is back in my day, if you were a hustler, if you could sell, you could find something that you could get into at a reasonable price and, make it that way. Now, things are franchised, things have contracted. Amazon controls everything. Apple controls everything. It's just really hard to find a niche that, if you don't have a specific skill, to go out and make it.
Yeah. Do you think there's any aspect that's gotten easier, like with AI and everything like that, and or does that just make it harder also because of the competition? You don't have to be as smart. Like, everybody can do it now.
And to invest in AI at scale is a big number.
Yeah.
And, the people that are going to take advantage, I look at my customers that are going to turn more and more to AI, which is going to it's going to be tougher for me. I think it's going to weed out my competition. There's always going to be a need for what I do. But instead of it being spread out, having, thousands of claims adjusters out on the street every day, tens of thousands, let's say, it's going to be just thousands.
Right.
So I just think the labor force, it's going to be tougher. And I don't hear stories like mine anymore. I mean, I know a bunch of kids that I knew when they were kids that are now in their 30s, and they'll call me. They're like, "Oh, senior, I can make $100,000 a year," And $100,000 a year back in the old days, you were making some money. $100,000 a year now, you can't afford a house and 2 cars and a wife that stays at home.
Right. You really can't.
No.
What's the new number?
250.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, 250 just to be, and live in Surprise or Goodyear and have a 2,500 square foot house, and your kids going to public school.
Right.
And it is, the numbers have gone up, prices have gone up, and I think personally that for the average guy, it's very, very hard to find your way. I mean, to me, I know if I graduated college today, I would still make it. But there were a lot of guys like me that made it. My drive and my hustle, my ability to close, my willingness to take risk, was so big that I think I could make it in any market. But there were guys that were a cut below me that, started, a plumbing company or electrical company, later on solar company that were able to make, maybe low 7 figures.
Yeah.
Now I just don't hear that as much.
You say that you would be able to do it in today's market. So the attributes that you just mentioned, the hustle, the hard work, the grit, the ability to take risks, do you think that's what is required now? Like if somebody wanted to make it and is young watching, and when I say make it, I mean, maybe Deca-millionaire, centimillionaire, right? Like, 10 million, 100 million, right? Like type of make it, like sell a company. Are those the main things that it takes?
And you have to have people that like you. For instance, when I started my first company, broke, barely paying my bills. My partner, my first partner was a CPA who knew that if he hitched his wagon to me, we were going to make it.
Sure.
Because I was the front guy. I was going to be the hustler. I was going to do the sales. I was going to do the managing. His parents, who had to post $300,000 of their stock to secure our first line of credit to fund our receivables, came to me and said, "We're backing you. We're not even backing our kid. We love our kid, but we're backing you." So because they liked me, knew me from the time I was young, knew the kind of person I was, were willing to put up that money. And to start a company where it was to fund receivables. So it wasn't even money to buy the company. It was the fund of the receivables. They were able to do it by posting, back in the day, it was AT&T stock in the bank to secure our line of credit. And, it's a pretty secure line of credit because it's, there's a borrowing base and it's a percentage of receivables. So it's pretty secure. So you got to have that feature too, like who sees you. When I started the Chicago Board Options Exchange at $850 a month, I showed up every day. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to bust my ass and someone's going to notice me. And that's, that gave me my next step, which gave me my next step.
Wow. It's really cool to hear that your friends' parents believed in you that much, At the time, how did that make you feel? Like, what was kind of going through your head of, like, did you feel like you had earned that?
No, I mean, I don't know how I earned it.
Yeah.
I've had that happen to me, several times throughout my career. Bankers, insurance guys, people that just had to, where when you go and you get a line of credit from a bank, you have your actuaries that look at all the numbers and they may say, this loan doesn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden the president of the bank is like, you know what, I'm going to override this because of Brett. And, I don't feel like I did anything special.
Yeah.
My partner would always say to me, there were 2 things that would always come up. Him being a CPA, he'd be like, "Well, what's the downside?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't register. Downside doesn't register with me. And and every year he'd be like, "Okay, let's do a budget." And my answer would be, "Well, we could do a budget on costs, and that's your side of the fence." he'd be like, well, what do you forecast? Are we going to grow 20% this year? Are we going to grow 30% this year? I'm like, bro, I'm going to put in 365 days of effort, and the numbers are going to be what the numbers are going to be. And I've carried that philosophy over 30 years later. Most people, most companies, you may be one of them, where you have people who work for you and you're like, okay, what are your goals? And they'll say, okay, I want to grow 20%. I don't even use the word goals. The word I use is, what are your minimums? What is the minimum you're going to do this year?
Yeah.
And let's do more than that. People get so hung up on goals. Let's say you have a top sales guy and he kills it the first 6 months. He's 20% over his goal. He's feeling like $1 million. He's got the boss happy. He's overcome his goal. He may the next 6 months mail it in. You know,
Right.
It's such a bad mindset to me with goals. A lot of people get to 80% of their goals and they figure, oh, my goal was unrealistic, so I achieved my goal. Why not just have a minimum
Right.
that you're going to do? And here's the other thing that I always do. I count the numbers at the end. I'm not going to be looking at them and be satisfied, dissatisfied. If I put in 365 days of honest effort, the numbers are going to be what the numbers are going to be. And I'm going to be able to look at myself and say, you know what? I did the best I could. I can't make people sign on the line that is dotted.
Yeah.
But I can do everything possible to try to get them to that point.
It's really cool. Let's dive into your first company that you built a little bit. I want to kind of dissect that. And where did the idea come from? How old were you at the time, and what did that look like for you?
All right, this is kind of classic. So I started at the Chicago Board Options Exchange, making $850 a month. Someone noticed me, brought me on their desk, paid me $30,000. Then I have an ability to meet people. Met a guy who we referred to as the scam man, and he was a guy, and this is back in the 80s when, Wall Street, the movie Wall Street was out, and greed is good, and blah, blah, blah. And he it's basically insider trading. The statute of limitations have passed, and he knew a stock that was going to be bought.
Sure.
So I rustled up all the money I could, bought a bunch of options. I remember leaving for lunch, coming back to the floor, and the stock had halted. So we're like, holy shit. When stocks halted back in the day, and it used to happen all the time, that meant that there was going to be an announcement. Sure enough, it was a deal. Stock went up $30. I made $1 million.
Wow.
I'm 23 at the time. So I ended up leaving my job, becoming a trader, lost all my money. I would have been a great broker executing orders for people, but my high tolerance for risk, I made $1 million a day. I'm like, okay, let's make $2 million a day. I was never a guy that was just going to churn out $10,000 a day.
Right.
And lost it all. Left the floor, took a year to figure out something to do, became a recruiter, worked for a guy for 6 months. I'm like, why am I giving you 50%? Went on my own, started my company with a $5,000 credit card. Got a line of credit, was working from a 1-bedroom apartment, built that into a business that I was, probably making $200,000 a year. But knew I was so underachieving. Went to opening day at a Cub game in April of 1990. Got totally hammered, came home at 4 o'clock in the morning, woke up at like 2 in the afternoon, and I'm like, man, you are a loser. What are you doing with your life? And there was this magazine called Entrepreneur Magazine. I just started flipping through it. I'm like flipping through it. And I saw this full-page ad, full-page ad for a company called Snelling Temporary Services. I'm like, I'm going to call them. So I called the number. They were in Florida. But tells you how hungover I was. By the time I called them, because they were on the East Coast, I was in Chicago, the office was closed. So, now I'm fired up. I want to do something.
Yeah.
So I went to the Yellow Pages and wanted to see if there are any Snelling temporary service offices in the area. Sure enough, there was one like 5 miles from where I live. Called it, spoke to the owner, and my idea in the beginning was he was doing temporary services. I was doing permanent placement. I'm thinking, okay, we could partner. Talk to him for like 15 minutes, tell him my story. He's like, hey, how about you come in and we'll talk about it? So I'm like really fired up. I'm on to something. Never called the franchise, or I'm like, okay, I might be able to get a deal. I go into his office. He's like, me and my wife are getting divorced. We can't keep the business. How about you buy me? I'm like, yeah. But remember, I have $0.
Right.
$0. So I call my buddy who was, we went to high school together, we went to college together. He's a genius with numbers. I tell him, I'm like, you think we could raise this money? And that's where his parents came in.
Wow.
And so we agreed. The company had made like $150,000 the year before. He's like, I'll sell it to you for 1 time's earnings for $150,000. We agreed on the price. We had planned on putting $50,000 down and then financing $100,000. Bank at first is like, oh, this is a great deal. We'll loan you the money. Parents were, kind of on board. We're about 10 days away from closing. And the bank's like, we need this money secured. We're not lending 2 26-year-old kids with no money, the money, free. I went to the owner, and this is how nervous he was selling it to a 26-year-old kid. It was $150 down and $100 on a note, like 3-year balloon. I said, how about we give you $100 cash? So 33% discount. Guy's like, done. I just want my $100,000, not have to mentor you, anything. Company was making, like I said, $150,000, but one line item in the P&L that I saw, he was paying a consultant $50,000 a year to help them run the business. I'm like, well, that's $50,000 of profit.
Right.
If I'm going to run a business, I ain't hiring any consultant. I'm going to do the work. So he took it. I went back to the bank. I'm like, really, this is this amount of profit. And the bank ended up, we needed $300,000 of working capital. So we needed $400,000. Parents posted their stock. We paid them $100,000. The first month, we made $30,000
profit. Wow.
So it went from making, $10,000, $12,000 a month to we made $30,000 a month the first month. And that was the least amount of money we made in the next 6.5 years of the company. So we bought, one office. I go in, I went and spent $5,000 on suits, and $5,000 on suits back in that day was, they were all Hugo Boss suits. I had to have little tags to say this tie matches with this suit and this socks and blah, blah, blah. I went to 3 weeks of training in Florida from the franchisor. They trained us on the temporary side, the permanent side, and then management side. And I'm in there with guys that are in their 40s, guys that are in their 50s. I'm 26 years old. At the end, the group voted most likely to succeed, and I was voted most likely to succeed. So I just had this innate ability. And I remember the first day we went into the office, and the staff comes in. It was like a staff of 6 or 7 people. And I'm like, my name is Brett Hardt. I'm the new owner. Yeah. Everyone's older than me. They're like, oh, I better start looking for a new job.
Yeah.
And I just knew how, being in the staffing business, there's a client side and the candidate side. And that is kind of my gift, is being able to relate to people from, all walks of life.
Sure.
So we started our first company, and then, we ended up buying 4 other offices. Again, buying from people who were making a little bit of money, went in, was able to offer cash. So we were all over, like the Chicagoland area, bought an office in Kalamazoo, Michigan, started one, So our first year we started July 1st, 1990. By the end of the year, we were the year prior, they were like the 100th franchise in total revenue. In just our 6 months, we were number 2.
Wow.
The following year, we were the top franchisee in the country, and then we were the top franchisee in the country 5 consecutive years. Now, how I was able to sell was I was such a pain in the ass to the franchisor because you paid them 5%, and then you paid part of their marketing. I'm like, I'm not getting anything for this money. I'm going to leave if you don't do more. And I kept whittling them down to where I basically cut my costs in half. But that's, bottom straight above taxes,
right?
Bottom line money. And when you're doing $20 million, 3-4 points is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they got a big line of credit from like a PE group, and they wanted me out. They're like, okay, he's making this amount of money. He squeezed us on this amount of money. We'll just buy him, and it'll pay for itself.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, they buy me. Their first year, and this is no exaggeration, their first year store-to-store sales were down 60%.
Wow.
So they thought they knew what they were doing, and they were the franchisor.
Yeah.
They're thinking, oh, we're better than him. Down 60%, and we got our money, and we left the industry.
Yeah. And at that point, you on paper, you retired officially. I mean, now obviously there's more to the story, but at that point you retired. My
license plate, to give you an example, I bought a 500 SL. It was my dream car from the time I was like 15 when the first 500 SL came out. This guy I knew, who I totally respected, had a lot of money. We were at a wedding, came out of the wedding, we're waiting for our cars. This 500 SL pulls up, and it's a hardtop convertible. The guy puts the top down. He looks at me. He's like, yeah, German engineering.
Yeah.
I'm like, one day I'm going to have one of those. So I bought that car, and my license plate, I still have it hanging in my garage, was I am done.
Wow.
So that was me. I was done.
And you were 32
at
the time.
32 years old.
Wow.
My partner's like, oh, we can do covered calls. We could, the money will grow at this amount. And this, again, this is back now. And this is in 1996.
Okay.
For the bubble, for the .com bubble. Market's rolling. All we got to do is invest our money, be reasonable. Well, then I started trading again. And, didn't lose all of it. Could have lived a simple life. Moved out here. I had built a 10,000 square foot house in Chicago. It was my dream house. It was on the country club that, I thought I was going to retire from or live the rest of my life. And lived there like 6 months, came to Arizona, I was playing True North Country Club on a guy's golf trip. Played, this will tell you how spontaneous I am. Played 18 holes. We're having lunch. I drove up the street from True North, saw a house, bought it before we started the second 18.
Wow.
I'm like, I'd been doing golf trips in Arizona. I'm like, why am I going to live in Chicago if I'm retired? I'm not going to deal with those winters. And packed up and moved out here.
Sold the house in Chicago.
It took like 7 years to
really?
sell that house. I built it. It was like a total dude's house.
Yeah.
Not a house that was attractive for other people. I had, 24 TVs in it.
Yeah.
And I took gas. The good thing I did, again, this is what we were talking about before we got on set. I set it up as a rental, so I was able to depreciate it. So my number wasn't as bad as it was on paper.
Wow. What a crazy story. And I want to get into the second half of the story here in a minute. I want to go back to a part where you said, you bought the company, right? And the first month you made 30 grand. What was it, looking back at that allowed you to do that? Because 1 month's not a long time.
No.
How do you go from 10 grand to 30 grand in 1 month?
I had a bunch of hot sales people, women, and I was in the light industrial space. So I was in these warehouses. So my good looking, I mean, not supermodel good looking, but attractive women would go in and butter up these warehouse managers. They were decision makers. You know, you meet a beautiful girl, you know, you guys are sick.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, you know, I'm interested. But that's what would happen before. You know, I hired 3 like within the first week, but I had 2 that were there, and they'd be like, yeah, we get them on the hook, and then we can't close. So what it would be is they would go meet them, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm interested. Okay, I'm going to bring my boss in. And then I would go close.
Sure.
And I'm like, they're going to service you.
Yep.
They're going to be here once a week. They're going to come here for Friday. They're going to deliver the checks. We just did, extravagant customer service that was unheard of back in the day. And I was the closer.
Yeah.
So they would see me. They would butter them up. They would see me, I would close, and then they wouldn't see me again unless there was a problem. So this is back 1990. I had a phone in my car, but it was, $1 a minute. It was like a regular handheld phone. We had pagers still back in 1990. And we were a 24-hour-a-day business because we were in warehouses. There'd be 3 shifts. I'd be like, you could call me anytime. And I would get a text. I'd call my answering service. It'd be like, so-and-so from Rank Video called. They need 20 people. I was at a Bears playoff game and got a page and was filling orders from a payphone at a Bears game.
Wow.
So that kind of hustle. And then word spread. These guys are like, man, these guys are unbelievable. These guys will call. They'll do anything. And my biggest client, the client that made me the most amount of money, is the first week. I went through the client list, and I'm like, this client, why are we only doing this amount of business with them? And our terrible customer service. I'm like, give me a meeting.
Yeah.
This woman named Mary Lou, an ex-Marine woman, and I go into the meeting. Never forget the story. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go get more business. I'm the ultimate closer. I walk in. She's like, Brett, I appreciate all that you're telling me. I'm going to stop you right now. We currently have 6 vendors. You're 6th, and we're going to 3. But I have a soul, so I'm going to just let your people fall off through attrition. I'm not going to fire them all today. And I walked out of that meeting, and I'm like, so the client that was 40% of our business that was helping us make $12,000 a month, we're now going to lose that client. So I invited her to a Bears game. Her and I went to a Bears game. She's like, yeah, I'll go to a Bears game. It's not going to change my mind. Spent like 7 hours with her.
Yep.
Drank, used every trick I could the book. And she's like, okay, I'll give you a second chance. And then that client doubled, and that client doubled again, like in the next 6 months. And that was just the ability to not take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And people, the average person quits after the second no. And the average amount of times it takes a no to turn into a yes is 8 no's.
Right.
So I just kept plugging away.
It's crazy. For anybody who doesn't understand the industry, can you just briefly explain what you were fulfilling? Like, what was your product and your service in that company?
Okay, when I bought it, it was a high percentage of it was nurses, CNAs, RNs. And to familiarize the audience kind of what that is, every temporary or staffing nurse, CNA, RN, LPN, you'd have to fill one shift at a time. You'd have to make a call, fill a 12-hour shift. I looked at that business model. I'm like, why would I want to be in that? So a small portion of their business was light industrial, a little bit of clerical. I'm like, well, there's economies of scale in that. I'm like, I could get 10 people or 20 people or 50, or it ended up being in the hundreds down the road. I'm like, I'm done with this nursing stuff.
Sure.
I just ended it right away, and we focused on, this light industrial. Back in the day, the average pay was like $6 an hour.
Wow.
For these people. And a good markup would be 50%. So I was paying 6, billing 9, and then, I had work comp costs, I had payroll costs. It was skinny margins. The only good part about that type of business was a lot of them, they would work 4/12s. So I'd get the overtime.
Right.
So instead of it being $1.50 of gross margin, it would be, $2.75 of gross margin. So we went from less than 100 people to when, by the time I was done, I had 2,000 people on the street.
Wow.
But it is a very, very dirty business. I mean, it was, 24 hours a day. If we had an order for 30 people, we would set up 45 and hope that 30 would show up.
Wow.
And the level of service we'd have, if it was a midnight shift, my salespeople would show up and check those people in. So let's say in the rare instances where they needed 30, I sent 45. Let's say 40 showed up. I'd have to send 5 away. Sometimes the clients would be like, yeah, I'll take them. But most times they'd be like, hey, I only ordered 30. We would offer the candidates, and this is how bad it was. We'd say, okay, we'll pay you for drive time, which was 1 hour of work.
Yep.
And they'd be like, okay, I get 1 hour of work, and I didn't really want to work anyhow.
Right.
So that was our niche, was, big numbers, skinny margins, but a brutal business. For the first 3 years, I was I had the pager.
Yeah.
I would, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If a client called, I responded to them. After 3 years and we had grown and I built a big staff, I'm like, okay, we're going to go in rotation. I'll take the pager, 1 of every 4 months.
Sure. Wow. It really is crazy. So who were the types of businesses hiring you to fill roles, to fill staff?
Like, big part was of fulfillment companies.
Okay.
Now everything that was automated, I'll revert back to my biggest client, which was Rank Video.
Sure.
They were the ones that, a movie would come out, and when it was a Disney movie and they had that account, it would be fulfilling those boxes of VHS tapes that eventually went to Blockbuster.
Got it.
So it was a huge, huge thing. Another business that is now gone.
Yeah.
Obsolete. I mean, I had a friend of mine that was in the printing business who, had an office on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, millions and millions of dollars of printing presses, out of business.
Yeah. It really is crazy.
Who prints anything? Who goes to a printer?
Nobody.
Who prints brochures?
Yeah.
They don't even make brochures anymore. They're all sent.
It's all digital.
Yeah, it's all digital.
And he should have gone and pivoted digital.
Yeah.
Started like an advertising, like digital advertising or something. You know?
He wasn't really the advertiser.
Got it.
He was
Just the printer.
Yeah. Rank Video.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as Rank Video anymore.
Sure. Yeah, it's crazy. Who at that point in your life, when you're building this initial company, like who were you getting advice from? Like what? Obviously, YouTube didn't exist. Like people couldn't just watch a podcast. Like in today's day and age, 25-year-old entrepreneur and 18-year-old entrepreneur is watching you right now, and they can just take notes and they can go implement, right? But back then, like what was it? Dale Carnegie? I mean, who were you?
I can tell you, didn't read a book, I can't stand Tony Robbins. I am not into someone selling me how to be successful. I mean, I am not fabricating this story at all. The only advice I got was from my dad, who was, as we get to the next part of the story, was a claims manager in the insurance business. And the advice he gave me was, treat your employees with respect. Do extra for them. One of the first things I did that I still do to this day is I buy my whole company lunch on Fridays. That little thing, which cost me pennies. I mean, people would start talking on Thursday, like, what are we going to have for lunch tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I gave my salespeople, if they met their minimums during the week on X amount of calls that they had face-to-face, I gave them Friday afternoons off because I'm like, salespeople don't work on Friday afternoons anyhow. So let's do a double benefit. They were going to work anyhow, so let me have them meet their minimum amount of appointment goals. I'm going to give them Friday afternoon off.
Right.
And I just used common sense approach. Like being an employee when I was younger, my family makes fun of me all the time because I probably had, and not an exaggeration again, over 50 different jobs that I did from the time I was 14. I'd come home from college for Thanksgiving weekend, come home on, Wednesday and go on Sunday. I would find a job.
Yeah.
I would go make $5-6 an hour. I was always hustling. In college, I was president of my fraternity. I used to run beer parties where the fraternity would make $2,500 at a good party. It was always about the hustle because I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
I liked things. I wanted to make money. So I was always thinking of ways to make money. And then on the flip side of that is working for so many people, I realized the things that they did well.
Sure.
And I realized the things that I hated. So I used the things that they did well, I implemented. I didn't come up with any original idea, maybe other than the Friday lunch. And now that Google and those places, it's common, but I was doing that back in 1990. I just took the things that I liked, implemented in my company. The things that drove me crazy, I eliminated. You hear people, if you did reviews with your staff,
Sure.
their number one complaint that they would see, what don't I want to see? I hate micromanagement.
Yeah.
And I would tell my staff, I'd be like, if you're succeeding and you're doing well, I know this from my own experience, I love my boss to be micromanaging.
Yeah.
Because then he knows what a great job I'm doing.
Right.
The people who don't want micromanagement, I'm not doing micromanagement to bust your balls. I'm doing micromanagement, one, to hold you accountable, and two, I want to see what you're doing so I can help you.
Right.
I'm the expert. And I don't get this generation. I have a hard, if I was running the day-to-day today, it would be tough. I mean, I was hard. I would yell.
Yeah.
I mean, I would get people fired up. Some of the things I did back then, I would have lawsuits.
Yeah.
To be frank.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, times have changed completely. Yeah.
The people have changed.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it is the people you hire and stuff. I mean, our company, we do things that, if we hired the wrong people in some of our organizations, it wouldn't be good, right? We have to be very careful of who we hire. I mean, half the time in one of my companies where we have mostly younger guys wholesaling real estate, they do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning to the American flag, so like,
now Michael Moore wants to change the Pledge of Allegiance.
I know, which is unbelievable. Yeah. You said something a little while ago, like, before we get into the next part of the story, is like the Tony Robbins comment, right? Which is like, I'm not a big fan of the hoorah, like selling you how to sell or be a businessman. Do you think, because it kind of got my wheels turning, do you think that we live in a day and an age where there's actually too much information? Like young entrepreneurs actually struggle and have shiny object syndrome because there's too many people to listen to. There's too many voices. There's too many differing opinions out there of how to be successful, how to make a lot of money, how to build a company. And so therefore, like the analysis paralysis almost.
I can't believe you just said that. That was once you were done, I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Would you agree with that?
Am I allowed to curse at all?
Of course.
People are pussies.
Yeah.
So they just, I call it the big cloud, no rain syndrome.
Yeah.
People are, they have all these great ideas. I have a dear friend of mine who asks me questions all the time, looks for my advice. Happy. That's what I do. Happy to share that. And then he will talk to someone else and then talk to someone else.
And talk himself out of it.
And most of the times he won't do anything.
Yeah.
Or if I give him the advice, he doesn't do what I suggested, which I have no offense. But it's like, why waste my time?
Right.
But the paralysis by analysis, again, to me, that's an excuse. I didn't have those resources.
Right.
I've never been a believer in self-help. I've never looked in the mirror and said, God loves me. Today is my day. People like me. I'm going to get up. I'm going to show up. And the thing I like to do is I like to just stack my chips.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do today. I'm not going to future trip. I'm not going to get consumed about my past. All I can control, and being in recovery, I was this way before I was in recovery.
Sure.
But it's let's do today. I love people that say, "Oh, I'm going to get them next week."
Right.
Or, "Oh, next month is going to be my month." I'm like, why not just do today?
Yeah.
I'll worry about next month. I'm going to be around next month. So these self-help, it's kind of like stockbrokers for me. I manage my own money. If you're that good, if you have all the answers, number one, you're not sharing it.
Right.
And number two, you're just doing it. I hate to pick on Tony Robbins, but I know people that follow him around and listen to his go to his shows, and buy his books and buy his tapes, and they're the guys that are broke.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion. I'm in the minority. I believe in doing the right thing. I believe in treating people well. No one has left me for money.
Yeah.
In my career. They don't have to come to me. If they have come to me and are asking me for more money, either they don't deserve it or I'm not doing my job. So I always overpaid. I overpaid market.
Yeah.
Not 50%, but always overpaid market. And that's what the other piece of advice my dad gave me is invest in your people.
Yeah.
Invest in your good people. The one thing that, it's different between me and my partner, he's this guy, he'll say this to me all the time. He's like, "Can you believe, talking about an employee?" And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I expect that.
Yeah.
I mean, I expect them to not do what they're supposed to. I expect them to do less. I mean, I'm never going to believe what someone's telling me. I get all these, my involvement now, my company is I get end of week reports from all my senior staff. I don't want to hear what they're going to do next week.
Yeah.
I want to see what they did this week. And I want it in writing, and I want to know what we accomplished this week.
Sure. Every Friday.
Every Friday.
Yeah.
If I don't get it by Sunday,
Yeah.
where are they?
Sure.
And no one misses.
Yeah.
Because they know that is, to me, a fireable offense.
Yeah, we implemented that recently too.
Good.
With multiple of our companies. Kind of like Elon was doing, like with Doge.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yes.
making all the people send him an email of what they did that week.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
If you're doing well,
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the micromanagement
Yeah, you
thing.
would want to brag about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only people that don't want to do that are the people that aren't doing shit.
Right. Yeah.
So, those are things, going back to the old days of my selling company, this is what my salespeople did every morning. They would call me. They would tell me what they did the day before, and they would tell me what was planned for today. Every single day they would call, whether I answered, if I didn't answer, they'd be like, "Hey, Brett, this is Colleen. I just want you to know I had this meeting, this meeting, this meeting. This guy canceled, and this is what I'm doing today." That's all I care about. Like, people get this huge, they look big picture.
Yeah.
Big picture will take care of itself if you take care of the snapshot.
It's the truth. Yeah. So let's go to the second part of the story. Here you are. You're retired. 32, right? I'm done on the license tag. What happened, right? Like, what did life look like then? And then at what point did you get bored, or like what happened where you said, "You know what? I'm going to start another company"?
Well, I'm out here and playing golf every day. My best friend from college had some personal tragedy that he went through in Minneapolis, and he couldn't live there anymore. He was lost, didn't know what to do. I'm like, "Hey, bro, I'm going to Arizona. Come with me." He's like, "All right." So he came out here with me. lived with me for 6 months, ended up buying the house next door to where, I had bought. So I went from 10,000 square feet to like 2,100 square feet.
Got it.
That's how much I wanted to be in Arizona.
Yeah.
And when I left, my mom said to me as I'm leaving, she's like, over under 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, Ma, I ain't coming back.
Yeah.
I'm like, you could think that. So he came out here, got him to be one of the investors in the Golf Club Scottsdale, which is now Scottsdale National. And he was, he was completely lost. He ended up selling memberships. We were selling memberships before we even had the water rights, before the course was even being built. And he's, I think I'm a good salesman. He's even better than me. And he's got incredible hustle, like
Wow.
a motor that, he did 10 marathons in 2 years, qualified for Boston, would run sub 6 minute mile marathons. The guy, the only person I know that has a motor like him is Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'd hear stories about Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
drinking all night, playing cards all night, then scoring 50. My partner has that quality. He didn't have the things that I had.
Mm-hmm.
He, never ran a company. So we're here, and it was probably a year. And someone said to me, like, this is how my brain works. Someone said to me, is like, Brett, you need to do something.
Yeah.
This is not healthy. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm like, I had invested in a staffing company back in Chicago that was doing insurance claims.
Okay.
Just invested, my prior, when I was a recruiter, I was placing insurance adjusters. Both my parents were in insurance. I'm like, you know what? I think I could do that. So I'm like, hey, you in? Yeah, I'm in. I'm like, hey, I'll give you 42% of the company. I'll put all the money up. I'll teach you the business. He's like, in. I went to the newspaper. It was on a Saturday. Went to the newspaper, saw an ad for space in the air park, called up the agent, the managing agent. She's like, yeah, I'll meet you today. Walked in, saw 1,200 square feet. I'm like, I'll take it. Went to Home Depot or Office Max, bought a couple tables, a couple chairs, a couple phones, and we were set up in a week. Came up with a name, didn't know, and we just started. He's like, what do we do? I'm like, well, let's just start calling.
Yeah.
I'll call clients, you call candidates, and here's this. By the second month, we probably made 20 grand in our second month.
Wow.
Starting from nothing. We landed one client, placed a bunch of people, and just grinded it out. Never lost money. We got up to we were very comfortable. We got up to like a $20 million company, making a couple $1 million a year, cruising. I got tired of our space. We moved from one space in the air park in the building to a bigger space, had it built out. They were hassling us, didn't have a bathroom, and drove around.
The bathroom.
Just found a space at Cave Creek and Greenway, bought the space. I'm like, we're going to build this building. We had 7 people.
Yeah.
And I built this extravagant building.
7 people doing $20 million a year in top line revenue.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
That
had
revenue per employee is like not bad.
And it was, good margins, but and we hadn't landed any of the big accounts.
Sure.
I'm like, when I built it, I'm like, if we build it, they will come. We will grow into this. A couple points during the first few years, I had tenants, pain in the ass tenants, didn't pay. And then it probably took us 10 years before we built out the whole space.
Wow. That's crazy. And then you scaled. Then you started landing the bigger clients.
Well,
what happened then?
We landed the whale.
Okay.
There's one whale in our business that my partner called every Friday for over a decade. Got nowhere. Eventually we got an order for 2 people in San Francisco that is their smallest line of business. Filled that order. My partner just kept hammering. We were a sub vendor, then we were a semi-preferred vendor, and then we became, a top vendor. And that company, in our peak, doing over 9 figures, they were 60% of our business.
Wow.
And it's happened, I want to be honest with your viewers. 20 months ago, they hired a new CEO. They're like, we don't like this model anymore.
Yeah.
So we lost like 60% of our business, 50% of our business. So we've gone through some lean times, for the first time in my history of business, going back to 1990, I had losing months.
Yeah.
And we had private equity that wanted to buy us. Had we sold 6 months earlier.
Yeah.
But, we didn't, because it was cash flowing so much money.
Sure.
I mean, insane money. We thought my son, who's now 22, that just graduated, we're like, oh, he'll just take the business. I mean, who doesn't want cash flow?
Right.
We could always cash out later. So we've had to retool our business. We've had to rebuild the business. And good timing. June 15th or June 16th, I think it's whatever the Monday is after Father's Day, we've replaced our biggest client with the number 2 insurance carrier in the United States, and we're like their sole provider.
Wow.
We had taken out 30,000 square feet in Atlanta, or in Dallas, 30,000 square feet in Atlanta, which have, for the most parts, other than hurricane season, have been vacant. Been a major strain on cash flow. Well, we're going to have over 200 people in our Atlanta office by June 16th.
Wow.
So
really cool.
We went from just being this little niche in the insurance business, and now we're in all these other verticals. And it's, nobody likes to lose money.
Yeah.
But it has forced us to grow the business, not be reliant. In the end, we're going to be more profitable to a potential buyer, because nobody wants to buy someone that 60% of your business is one client, because what happened to us can always happen.
Yeah.
So now you diversify that business, you have a wider scope. So out of the top 10 insurance carriers, we now do business with 8 of them.
Wow.
Instead of 2. And now we just have to, we have to build, we just keep filling that pipeline.
Yeah.
And it never has to end if you keep building the pipeline. I always talk about the, spinning the 7 plates.
Yep.
So many people, I'm sure you know this. You have guys that get a whole bunch of deals, and then those deals get closed, and then 2 weeks later, like, fuck, man, I got nothing going on.
Yep.
Well, you know why you got nothing going on? Because you
fill the
weren't prospecting. You weren't making cold calls. You weren't sending out correspondence. You become deal-centric, where you have to always be doing the 7 things all the time, or that plate's going to break.
It sure will. What keeps you going now? Looking at it now. I mean, obviously you're at a point where, if you wanted to, I'm sure you could just chill, go get a house in Hawaii, whatever, right? Like, just hang out, like, why keep going, right?
Because of what I just went through, because I had to go through the downtime. I don't want that to be my legacy. My partner runs the majority of the business. I am a very, very high paid consultant to the business. I'm the numbers guy. I'm the idea guy. Anybody that gets stuck, or when I see these end of week reports, I can dissect them and find the bullet point that's going to improve them. I also have my son, who's 22, that just, he graduated from TCU like 3 weeks ago. He went with my partner to London. That's like our emerging market, is doing business with Lloyd's of London, because they open up a bunch of markets domestically. To have him be a part of it keeps me motivated. And, aren't we all always driven by money?
Yeah.
And, I would never want to go out. You see pro athletes, they want to go out on their own terms.
Yeah.
None of them do. They always go out at the end or when they're broken. I don't want that to be my legacy. And I have 150 permanent staff members that I feel responsible for. Sure. And we're almost like a startup now. So there's that whole thing of building something again.
Yeah. And,
I have no doubt. What's the timeline? How soon? I don't control that.
Sure.
We're going to just keep grinding and it will get there.
Yeah, 100%. I've had a lot of people on the show, Brett, that have made a lot of money and lost a lot of money, like a lot of people, including myself, multiple times, similar to you. And I've noticed over the course of running this podcast and really just being in the world of, like you, similar to you, connecting with people, right? There's kind of that commonality with entrepreneurs where, at some point in their life, they've like been on the mountaintop and then they've been in the valley, right? And something about that transition from being on the mountaintop to having nothing rewires them and like gets them going again. Like, do you think that it's almost a requirement for success? Like, do you think that young entrepreneurs watching this, like, have you ever met anybody that can just make a lot of money in a linear fashion and stay there? Or have you also noticed the same commonality where they have to go to ground zero at some point to learn some lesson?
You look at all these tech billionaires, they were broke. They were in one of those nerd labs trying to do something, chasing money, losing money for a long period of time. They eventually got, when you're getting billions, there's not going to be much struggle later, but they went through the struggle early.
Sure.
But if you haven't felt adversity, and to be frank to your audience, we look back, we took our eye off the ball. We were spending, we'd spend $300,000-$400,000 on our Christmas party. We'd have employee appreciation nights where we'd fly everybody in. Well-deserved. I bought my co-CEO a Porsche. We were just, and, my partner was in Telluride. He was golfing. And I will go on record as saying that I would tell him and my co-CEO, winter is coming. Like, I could see the tea leaves, but because I wasn't involved in the day-to-day, it wouldn't have been right for me to go in there and start, busting balls and being like, this is coming. My partner's definitely learned this. He went from, working 2 days a week to now working 7, busting his ass more than he ever has. But we would have never learned that. Winter is always coming.
Yeah.
If you think that things go up forever, we talked about my buddy in the printing business. We talked about the Blockbuster stores. The list goes on and on and on. More things are going to become obsolete.
Yeah.
We don't know which ones those are. We have an idea. So you better have some sort of skill. You better have some sort of hustle, and you better never rest on your laurels. You better never just think it's going to go up forever. I've never seen it. It's never happened. I've had things that have, the slope has been so high, straight up, like insane, like going from 30 million to 60 million to 100 million to close to 200 million quickly, like insane growth. And then I've seen it, the bottom fall out.
Yeah.
I hate that it happened to me, but why did I think I was immune from that? Why did me and my partner think that this shit would last forever? Nothing does.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? Well, in kind of conclusion here, I want to talk, if you're open to it, a little bit about the recovery stuff.
Sure.
And on the personal side, because obviously, I was saying, and I'm sure you've heard it or said it, I always tell my team and different people, like, a lot of times people don't have business problems. They have personal problems they bring to their business, right? And so I always tell entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I'm like, look, if your crap's jacked up at home, or if you're personally like not hitting the gym or eating like crap or drinking too much or partying too much or doing too much drugs or whatever the case may be, it's going to be more difficult to show up and build and be the best entrepreneur that you can be, right? And to always tell people, like, figure that out, and then it'll be that much easier to come and figure the business side of things out. So talk to me a little bit about the recovery stuff and like what that process has been like for you.
I was, as I've learned in recovery, I was born an alcoholic. My mom died at 69 from alcoholism. Her sister died at 41 from alcoholism. My dad's not an alcoholic. But I was so driven by money and success that, and when you're young, I had season tickets to the Bulls from the time Michael Jordan was a rookie. So I'd go to Bulls games, I'd go to 50 Bulls games a year. I could go, get hammered, be out till 3 a.m, never miss work.
Yeah.
Ever. Never not showed up. That was in my 20s, early 30s. Moved here, looking back, I kind of managed my drinking. I didn't even know what a blackout drinker was. I thought blackout drinker was you passed out. I never passed out.
Right.
Then I realized blackout is you don't remember what happened the night before. Yeah. I mean, I now am rewatching movies from the 80s and 90s that I saw. I remember who was in it, but I don't remember any of it, because I'm sure I was, impaired. So by being driven, I have a 10-year-old. So me and my wife have a 22-year-old and a 10-year-old. Not common. Say mama. When my 10-year-old was born, shortly thereafter, we decided to build this house that you're familiar with.
Yep.
That is when I started stepping away from the company. My partner was running most of it. I didn't, for whatever reason, I just started stepping away. Started building this house. Then we had our second kid. Obviously my wife is totally consumed with that one. I was spending all my time with our oldest, who was an elite basketball player. We were traveling all over the country. He'd be in one room, I'd be in another room. And then I got introduced to whiskey. Used to be a beer drinker, drank Captain Morgan. I could drink enough beer to get drunk, but I didn't like it. Captain Morgan was like drinking water. I got introduced to whiskey, and I really, really liked it. So I would, it would start. I would drive home from the office. I'd stop at the Cold Beer and Cheeseburgers, go in and have a double Tullamore Dew and a Coors Light, throw those down in 30 seconds, give the bartender $50, and that would be it. Well, then it's a progressive disease. So then I started drinking more. I realized, man, I can get drunk in like 30 seconds. And I kept, I was on my own. We have this huge house. I was isolated. My wife wouldn't even see me. My kids wouldn't see me. At the end, I was drinking against my will. I could get up in the morning and drive to the general store and go get four, I wasn't even drinking good whiskey by the end. I was drinking Fireball.
Yeah.
And I could do that. And, then I quit. Now I know all these dates, but I had quit on my birthday. It'll be 6 years, my birthday in November.
Okay.
I'd quit, told everyone I was quitting, made it like 6 months, didn't go to AA. I actually talked to a guy from AA. We played 18 holes of golf, told me all about it. I got done. I'm like, yeah, I could do this on my own. I got the willpower to do this. I've done that. I've done all this. I could do that. Made it like 6 months. I don't even remember when I picked up again.
Yeah.
And got, not only picked up where I left off, I had to make up for the 6 months I wasn't drinking. Christmas Eve, my dad's over. He's like, man, I can't believe it'd been over a year. I can't believe you had quit drinking this long. And I was hammered. I was
Yeah.
hammered at that time. And I lied to my dad. I'm like, yeah. Only person I lied to. Because in the beginning, people are like, oh, you're still not drinking? You're still not drinking? Yeah. Then after 6 months, people don't give a shit.
Right.
People just stopped asking. And I was so good at hiding it, I was getting blackout drunk every single day. So that's December. And what is it? It's 2025, so it was 2020. 2021. It was January 23rd, 2021. I had a blowout incident with by this time, I'm sleeping in one room. My wife's sleeping in another room because I, quote unquote, had sleep difficulties.
Sure.
Which is bullshit. I do have sleep difficulties, but it was bullshit. She didn't like me, rightfully so. But we didn't fight or anything. It was just, I was totally isolated. I was there, but I wasn't present. My now 22-year-old, major resentments towards me. That night, me and my wife have this insane blowout on my part. I said unthinkable things to my wife. No physical abuse, but just the worst things you could ever imagine. I got up that morning, and then I woke up in the morning. I'm like, holy shit, man, I really, really crossed the line. Called the guy who I talked to a year and a half earlier about AA. I'm like, bro, I need to go to a meeting. And this is in COVID. He's like, man, I do Zoom meetings. I'm like, man, no, you need to find me a meeting, like a real meeting. Went, we found one, drive to the west side. I brought a mask, and I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I'm like, man, I can't imagine if these guys survive drugs and alcohol, they're wearing a mask.
Right.
But I walked in with a mask. No one's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And I met those guys, and I was like, I'm home. And imagine having that fight with your wife and coming home the next day and saying, I'm an alcoholic. And she, as far as she knew, I hadn't been drinking for a year and 2 months. So she's got to think, this is bullshit. She's like, I can't do this anymore. We need to leave. And I had a spiritual experience. I had a seismic change where old Brett would have fought that, would have been like, this is my money.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I wrote her a check for $50,000. I'm like, oh, do what you got to do. So she took my 2 sons, my 3 dogs, and moved to an undisclosed location. Like, I didn't even know where she went. I mean, I didn't want her to leave.
Sure.
It took a couple weeks for it to happen. And obviously I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? She never brought up divorce or anything like that. She's just like, you need to do what you need to do. She moved out. A few weeks later, we met for coffee. I actually brought the big book. We started reading out of the book. We started reading the chapter about family afterwards. She started getting an understanding, and she saw me starting to change. Like, I wasn't trying to manipulate her anymore.
Right.
I was just going to show up every day, do the next right thing. I mean, I became so immersed in AA. They say do 90 meetings in 90 days. I did 130 meetings in 90 days, got a sponsor, did my steps, doing my 9th step with my oldest was fucking brutal.
Yeah.
Like, I brought up all the things that I thought, needed to be addressed, that, I was wrong about. But at the end, when you do that, you have to say, what else? Oh, did he have a what else? Like, he sat there and remember this, remember this, some of the things I remembered, some of the things I didn't. And I had to take that for, what seemed like hours. And he'd get off his chest, and, he wasn't, at that point, he wasn't going to forgive me.
Right.
Like, he couldn't stand. I don't blame him. And I took it like a man. I'm like, okay. I was wrong. I'm going to do the best I can. I can't undo the past. And now, then he went to college. It was right before he went to college. And, we FaceTime twice a week. We have the greatest relationship.
Wow.
luckily, my 10-year-old, who was 5 at the time, I mean, when I first got sober was January 24th. His birthday's January 31st. His 6th birthday, like, it was at our house, and, you know, Susie's standing on the other side of the counter, didn't even want to be around me. And this is how bad it was. Susie had signed a year lease. She moved back, like, you know, and they tell you this in AA, the miracles are going to happen. These promises are going to come true, you know. And I'm like, she ain't ever coming back.
Yeah.
And it was a short few months after that, that, you know, I built the trust. She saw that, you know, I had changed. She came back, and our marriage the last 4 years and 4 months or 5 months has never been better. And even like last night, she said to me, which she never would have done before sobriety. She was like, "Man, you're being a little aggressive to me." And of course, you know, my instinct is, "What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm not being aggressive." And I got into bed, and she took a shower. She comes into bed, and I'm like, "You know what? I was wrong. I guess I was being a little aggressive." Mm-hmm. And I've learned how to deal with life on life's terms. Mm-hmm. Recovery for me has been, my life was good, but it was when you're in your addiction, mm-hmm. it's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even remember. I mean, like I said, I saw 500 games of Michael Jordan, and I was there, and I remember the moments, but man, I miss so much because of my drinking. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for anyone out there who's struggling, there's a solution.
Yeah.
And I guarantee when I walked in and friends of mine heard that I was in AA, they're like, "Oh, he's just doing that to get his wife back." Mm-hmm. No way he's going to stay sober. No way. And I've only had one time, 9 months into sobriety, where I almost relapsed. I was visiting my kid at TCU. It was Dad's weekend. We went to a football game. I was staying at the hotel. He was staying in his apartment, and there was a rooftop bar. And I'm like, man, I could just go up there and get hammered. No one will know. Yeah. I'll just go to my room. And I fell asleep, woke up, and like, holy shit, called my sponsor, found a meeting that I had to walk to, went to a meeting. And that's the only time that a relapse has popped up. And it just keeps getting better and better for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, first of all, because somebody out there is struggling, and that story will inspire them to take action to change. What do you think it is about the way that entrepreneurs are wired that there's such a close relationship with addiction and entrepreneurship? Because I'm not kidding you when I say
it's true.
I'm not kidding you. I don't know what the percentage would be, but probably out of the couple hundred massively successful people that I've had sit right where you're sitting, you know, guys with, you know, just like you, right, with all the money in the world, all the success in the world, that have either struggled with addiction or were currently struggling with addiction when they sat in that chair is mind-boggling, including myself. What do you think that is? Like,
I like to say it's my blessing and my curse. Mm-hmm. Like, I think some of the attributes that I have, the way my brain is wired, is synonymous with addiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't have any proof of that.
Sure.
But I think, you know, because people in AA, I mean, this is in the big book, we're generally higher achievers, mm-hmm. Higher IQ. We have a lot of good things that go along with the way our brain is wired with addiction. Yeah. There's so, you know, you look at all the people in Hollywood mm-hmm. that are in recovery. There's so many more that are one of us, but aren't in recovery mm-hmm. or have tried recovery. The most unlikely people to get sober are successful dudes and hot women.
Yeah.
Why? Because we think we have shit that don't stink.
Yeah.
We think, man, if I made all this money, fuck, I deserve to drink.
Yeah.
You know, you had my life, you had my stresses, you drink too. Mm-hmm. there's, again, I've never seen, data proving that. But I don't know if it's our rational behavior, like our mentality of getting a reward, or our mentality of I've done this so I can do this.
Yeah.
But there is no doubt in my mind that, and the sad thing to me is there's so many out there that are suffering
Right.
from alcoholism, maybe afraid of the stigma of going to a meeting, like, oh, they're all a bunch of, do I really want to? If you went to the meeting I just went to last night at Pinnacle Peak in Pima, the level of, like the wealth in that room is probably astronomical. We don't know because we don't talk about shit like that,
Right.
but I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell by the way they talk that they've achieved great things. And most of them, I was fortunate that I was able to achieve all these things before my alcoholism manifested. Most of them had to be beaten down, went to prison, were on the streets, living in, sober houses to get clean, then achieve their goals.
Right.
Fortunately for me, I know this now looking back, that I was so driven to succeed, and I knew how I felt, when I went out for an all-night bender, and how hard as I got older it was to recover, that I was able to, keep it, suppress it, and, maybe only go once a week. But eventually it's going to get you. And then I got to the point where I had time, I had opportunity, I had money, and I was bored.
Yeah.
That combination is a bad combination for an alcoholic.
And entrepreneurs. I think that there's something to be said about a bored entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've met a lot of people that I know, really high net worth individuals that say the worst thing for them is a calendar with a bunch of white on it.
Yep.
You know, because if you don't have anything to do, you're going to find something to do, and it's most likely not going to be productive.
And I do have a major sleep disorder. Like, I've tried, every medication, every meditation. I've gone to shamans. I've done acupuncture. I've done it all. And I struggle with that. So, when I used to sleep, it wasn't good sleep. It's when I was fucking hammered.
Yeah.
So my brain never, ever turns off.
Right.
It is my blessing and my curse. I've learned to kind of accept my struggles with sleep. And I know drinking is not the solution.
Right.
It isn't for me. So if that's the thing I have to deal with,
then you'll deal with it.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. One of my couple more questions, and we'll get you out of here, is your shirt, right? Yep. Attitude is free. What does that mean to you?
I just came up with it one day, and I put it on a few T-shirts. And, I told you, I used to travel a lot with my kid, so we're in and out of airports. And it was amazing how many people would be like, man, I love that. Or, attitude is free and mine sucks. And, even TSA people. So I trademarked it. And I read an article. It's actually kind of unfortunate because, we never made any money selling T-shirts because everybody has a brand, right, as you know. But I read an article in the Wall Street Journal how Life is Good built a company that did $100 million in sales, which is, I think it's like $18,000 a day in T-shirt sales. But I saw that $100 million, and I'm like, I think Attitude is Free is better than Life is Good.
Sure.
So again, me and my partner are flush. We're killing it. I'm sponsoring these basketball teams. We're like, hey, let's do an apparel company. So we did. We even hired our Kardashian, which got our Instagram followers up to like 100,000, blah, blah, blah. Our niche in the beginning was basketball. And the problem with basketball is people in basketball don't spend any money. Like if I would have been in baseball or tennis or, where people spend money, maybe I would have had a chance.
Yeah.
So I ended up giving away way more than I sold. But to me, what it means is, if I can come with a good attitude, I have a chance.
Right.
When I was in the throes of my addiction, I remember Susie, she never would, she's English, proper, has only yelled at me less than 5 times in our marriage, which tells you when she does yell at you, you better pay attention.
Right.
I remember this vividly. She's like, you wear that fucking T-shirt, attitude is free. Why don't you start having a good attitude? And that really hit home. Granted, I was still in my addiction.
Right.
So it registered for a minute and then I forgot about it. But I think about that all the time now. In a meeting last night, we were talking about the 6th step and character defects. And one of the guys in the meeting is like, Brett wears that T-shirt all the time. He's like, my character defect is I pretty much have bad attitude. So I just want to send that out in the universe.
Yeah.
Like we basically gave it to this family who has a daughter who's the top gymnast in the country, who's going to be an Olympian. They wanted the company, and I hope it does huge success for them.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder.
That's cool.
That you can't. Effort is effort.
Right.
People are like, oh, all I want is attitude. I have friends of mine that all I tell my kid is attitude and effort. And I'm like, yeah, but the effort is still effort.
Yeah.
You still have to put in the reps. Attitude, be kind to someone. Give them a compliment, say please, say thank you, open a door for someone, hold a door for someone. Those things. Being in AA, never believed in God. I was totally agnostic. I didn't even know the Lord's Prayer. Didn't know what the Serenity Prayer was. I thought I was going to have a hard time with that. And then when I had a spiritual awakening, which I truly did, and I had a seismic change in my personality, I know I couldn't have done that.
Right.
And to lift the obsession of alcohol. I mean, I was drinking again. I would wake up in the morning and say, I'm not going to drink today, and then would end up drinking.
Yeah.
I was drinking against my will. So I wasn't able to do that.
Right.
So, I'm not this holy roller guy, but man, I believe in a power greater than me.
Yeah. Man, it gives me goosebumps to think about because I'm with you there. There's been a lot of times in my life similar to you and a lot of people watching, right? Where but you have to look for it. But if you look for it, there's things in our life where it's like, there's no way that was me.
No.
Right? Like there's just no way.
I'm not that good.
No.
And I don't even know. I'll just tell you this really quick story. I bought a new house and it was a builder spec with, an owner. And when I first went through and we got the report, there were a bunch of things that I wanted the builder to do. Some things that I thought were his responsibility, some things that I was willing to pay for. There's $50,000 in escrow. Well, the 60 days is at 30 days. It came up and I'm like, you told me you were going to do this and you didn't do this, and I could see primer on the walls, so I had to paint the house, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not paying, I'm not releasing the money. So then, the next step, you go to arbitration, and then at first I'm like, $7,500 and I'll call it even. Then I was even more pissed and it was 15 grand. And then I went back to 7,500 and the guy, one of the owners of the company who I don't even know, was like, no. I'm like, all right, I'm going to arbitration. I got a buddy of mine in AA who's an attorney. He'll do it for free. And I'm laying in bed one night and it's 10:38 at night. And I'm like, you know what? That's not what AA teaches you. I'm going to have a resentment towards this guy. And what was my part? My part was, I didn't get the stuff in writing. It could have totally been a misunderstanding. Yeah. Wrote him an email 10:38 at night and said, release all the money.
Wow.
Susie wakes up in the morning. She's like, what are you doing writing emails at 10:38? I'm like, it was bugging me. The money is the money. whether it was 15 grand, 7,500, 1.5 million, that's the type of shit that might lead me to drinking again.
Sure.
So without AA,
I
never write that email. I'm getting the last word. I'm fighting tooth and nail. So, holding those resentments, sometimes you got to look at it, which I was never able to look at my part. I was able to look at my part. I didn't do everything. It could have been a misunderstanding. And you know what? I'm going to release the money.
Yeah, I like that. Phenomenal, really a phenomenal way to live life, ultimately.
It's certainly, a big line in AA is how free do you want to be?
Right.
And holding resentments against people, strong-arming people, it's going to, how does it affect you?
Yeah.
And when it affects you negatively, that's on you. I can't control you. I mean, everybody's sick.
Yeah.
Some people sicker than others.
Sure.
So clean your side of the street, and then it's amazing how good things happen when you do that.
Ain't that the truth? All right, my final question for you, Brett. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs, obviously, that watch the show, as you might imagine. A lot of people that want to be successful. A lot of people maybe that already are successful, and everywhere in between. You got a lot of great advice growing up. You said your dad gave you great advice. You got great advice, I'm sure, from your business partners, from all sorts of different people, right? And AA now, later on in life. And this might be hard, but if you could talk to all the young entrepreneurs out there that want eventually to be successful, drive the cool car, take their family to cool places, do all the cool things, build cool companies, take care of their employees, what's one piece of advice? If you had to just take the best piece of advice maybe that you've ever gotten, what's one piece of advice that you would give to everybody watching?
It's a great question. The ultimate rank video I spoke about earlier, my first company, and my partner's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? My partner today, like when we lost our biggest client, or pretty much it's faded away, what are we going to do? To me, the only way through is, and this is another quote that I trademarked, more is more, go get more. Sales takes care of costs. Hey, you can manage costs, you can cut costs, you can do those things, but you want to get to that next level. What are you doing today to get more? Not necessarily today. If you can get a client today, they're probably not going to be a good client, because that means they're leaving their current provider, which means they're probably going to leave you. And if it's about price, you're fucked. The lowest price, it's not the lowest price, it's the best value.
Sure.
So to me, it's always about how, and I'm certain, knowing you, that you're always looking at, how do I get more?
Yep.
How do I increase my revenue stream? If you're not doing something today to build future clients, build future business, get more revenue, eventually you're going to lose revenue, and costs are going to go up.
Phenomenal advice for every entrepreneur. Yeah. Brett, where can people find you if they want to connect with you in any fashion? Are you on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that?
At Brett S. Hardt is my Instagram. Cool. People can email me.
Cool. I
have no problem. If there's some young guy out there that would like to chat, I'm not, I quoted how I hate Tony Robbins, so I'm certainly never going to charge anybody for advice. Anybody struggling and thinking about recovery that would like to talk to me about it, I'd be happy to do that. My email is brett@thebestclaims.com. That's our company, The Best Claims, one word. I'm at the point in my life where I want to give back.
Yeah.
I want to help young people. I still mentor. There were 4 guys in the NBA final game last night that have trained at my house, at my gym. And what was funny, those guys that, there's a kid that we know that's going to sign a $254 million contract. But when I was meeting those guys, I had Julius Randle at my house, last summer. All these guys that I met would want to know my story.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you want to know some 5'10" white guy's story? But I love guys that are inquisitive.
Yeah.
I love guys that, those were the guys that I spent a lot of time with. Guys that would, they'd get done training at my house and get on their phone and texting their girlfriends. I'm like, oh, no problem. I'm not going to impose my will on anybody. But the guys that sat down, Lou Dort, who hit 5 threes last night, would be like, hey, senior, tell me, what are you doing? So
that's really cool.
And I want to pay it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you did a lot of that just by being on the show. And we'll link your Instagram, your email, and everything down in the description below. So for anybody watching, they can definitely get a hold of you. And I myself might be calling you to get advice.
And hey, what you're doing, I don't know your numbers. I don't know how you make your money. Having your wife that I can tell you get along with, who's amazing. I respect the hustle, man.
I appreciate it, man.
Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Mm-hmm.
Rome wasn't built in a day. I've seen a lot of guys. I'm not saying this applies to you. I've seen a lot of guys. I like to be an expert in what I'm an expert in.
Mm-hmm.
I got into the apparel business, loser.
Right.
I don't know anything about apparel. I don't know anything about Instagram. I didn't, I went into uncharted waters, fail.
Yeah.
I want to stick to what I'm good at and be the best at that. Now, within my business, I had a very small focus, and we built it into other verticals, but that took years and years and years.
Sure.
So that would be my other thing to tell those people out there. Be the master at one thing, and then maybe the master of two. Don't be kind of good at a lot of things. Those people make 50 grand a year.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. Yeah. Chase 2 rabbits, you'll catch neither, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, Brett. It was a real pleasure. And if you're still watching at the end of the show, his email, all of his stuff and information will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for staying till the end of the episode, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.